So the supplements is quite interesting. So you literally traveled around the world, right? You went to talk with the indigenous health, I guess, medicine people from different locations in different continents, and you probably brought back lots of different herbs and
I
tested
have
lots.
lots of things. Yeah, I'm a scientist, but I've always been puzzled by the scientific approach that says a thousand year history of using a plant can suddenly be denied or confirmed by a double-blind study done on 20 people.
Hmm.
That's how we look at modern science. The double blind becomes the gold standards and defines everything. To me, it's not. If something has been used for 1,000 years with results, and my study doesn't prove it, then I've got to go deeper and find what was wrong with my study. I cannot have 1,000 years of history of use with people reporting the benefit and there's not something there. So my starting point is always going into sort of folk medicine, historical data, what has been used. Let's take, for example, the sea buckthorn berry. Sea buckthorn berry looks benign as a product, but if you dive into traditional Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, Mongolian medicine, for at least 2,000 years, it has been used. And in the literature, what it has been used for is like lung cancer, lung disease, heart disease, cardiovascular problem, diabetes, liver regeneration, digestive system, and to help the skin repair from burn to the skin, injury to the skin, or bone fractures. Now look at the spread of the benefits: the heart, the lung, the cardiovascular system, the pancreas, actual repair, which is a sort of a hallmark of all these plants. They're all involved somewhere in repair of injury. So we went and if you look at sea buckthorn berry, it's available everywhere in the world, but it comes from the Himalayan region, super high altitude in that region of the Tibetan Plateau, the Himalayas. And Alexander the Great, so you see, 2,500 years ago, brought it back to the Mediterranean, and from there it spread everywhere. So it's everywhere. But in on the Tibetan plateau, in that high altitude, it grows to like no more than 2 meters. The berries are very small, very bitter. It's a very different type of biochemistry. And that's where it has been documented to have these benefits. So we went on the Tibetan plateau, designed, developed an extract of sea buckthorn berry. We tested it, and we saw a very, very good response on stem cell mobilization. So it's an example of how the research process led us to work and look at some of these plants. The Allomacroclada from Madagascar is another one. I was asking a pharmacist that I met by sort of randomly. Well, you've met Stephanie. She's an actress, and so we were at a Hollywood meeting in LA, and then as a scientist, it's not really my crowd. So I'm kind of sitting in the corner. I'm not really talking to a lot of people, and then somebody comes and says, "Hey, you two, you can talk together." It was a pharmacist, and her passion was to travel the world and look for plants for Alzheimer's and Parkinson. She went to Papua New Guinea, Madagascar, South America, Congo, hiking for weeks, and questioning and meeting healers and shamans and asking about all kinds of plants. I mean, this woman has an amazing life. So I told her, benign question: did you come across a plant that the healer would tell you this is good for everything? She says, nothing is good for everything. So I start to explain to her, I'm not looking for something that is good for everything. I'm looking for something that is good for one thing: stem cell mobilization. But that means people will talk about it in the lens of many different kinds of benefits. So she said, very interesting question. She said, when I went to Madagascar on her last trip, on the drive back to the airport, their guide and translator said, why don't you study that? And he stopped in a small market and scooped a full bag of these black beads. And he says, study that. They're on the way to the airport. She took the bag, flew back home, but she didn't like tell a scientist, study that. You study it for what? So she put it in her freezer, and it had been there for 5 years. So she sent me these little beads. We consumed them ourselves. Didn't really know what they were, and then we saw the strongest response that we had ever seen. And
Wow.
so starting to ask more questions, it's of all the species of aloe in Madagascar, 60 something species, one of them is used to make that compound, that medicine, local medicine called Vahona, and it's Allomacroclada. It grows in Antananarivo, in the region, in the high mountains. So we developed since then a whole system of collection and processing, and now we're making that ingredient, which is Allomacroclada. It's the main ingredient in that we have documented so far. So that's how all these ingredients have been sort of discovered.